Today we're going to talk about the drugs used in STIs. What are STIs? They are sexually transmitted infections. So in this lecture, we're going to cover concepts of physical injury. We're going to talk a little bit about disease. We're going to talk about infection. Then we're going to see what are sexually transmitted infections. Then we're going to look at which are the causative agents or the most commonly encountered STIs. So we're going to look at chlamydia, trachomatis. We're going to look at Neisseria, gonorrhea. We're going to look at Treponema pallidum. We're going to look at herpes simplex viruses. And we're going to look at trichomonas. Okay. So this is not a very comprehensive list, but these are the most commonly encountered STIs. So that is the reason that we have selected these 5 among the many. Okay. So first we'll look at physical injury. Okay. Physical injury. So physical injury basically means it's a damage to the physical body. Okay, so any damage to the physical body, we call it a physical injury. Now this may be, this can be due to many reasons, like say mechanical trauma. Okay, and this mechanical trauma again can be due to a blow, can be due to a cut, or it could be a penetrating wound. Okay, like a sharp injury. Okay, maybe it was caused by sharps. Okay, so this is examples of mechanical trauma. It could be due to other things also, like say electrical discharge. And it could be due to maybe increased pressure, or maybe radiation. Or heat, like, yeah. So that is what we mean by a physical injury. Okay, so anything, so then the question is, what is the disease? So disease, basically it is a disorder of the structure or function of the body and the requirement is that it is not an injury. Okay. It is not a physical injury. Okay, so what do we mean by it's not a physical injury? We mean to say that there is some symptoms associated with a disease. There is a symptom associated with a disease. Okay, and it may affect a particular location in the body. Location in the body. So anything that is not a result of injury and it affects the structure and function of the body, we call it a disease. And if this disease is caused by, say, an infectious agent, then the disease is of two types. Okay? One we call a non-contagious disease, and if it is caused by an infectious agent that can be transmitted, we call it a contagious disease, meaning it can be spread from person to person, from one person who is infected to the next person. Okay, so yeah, so infectious agents can cause two types of diseases: non-contagious disease and contagious disease. So we are going to study sexually transmitted infections. Okay? So what are sexually transmitted infections? They are contagious diseases which are spread by infectious agent, and the mode of transmission is usually by sexual activity. Okay, so let's write it down here. So an STI is a contagious condition and whose mode of transmission of which is sexual activity. Okay, and this sexual activity in turn involves moist mucous membranes. Okay, what could be the example of these moist mucous membranes which are involved in the sexual activity? Yes, it can be the penis, it can be the vulva, it can be the vagina, it can be the cervix, it can be the anus, it can be the rectum, it can be the mouth, it can be the pharynx, and it can be adjacent surfaces as well. Okay, so the sexual activity usually involves the moist mucous membranes. Depending on the type of sexual activity, these membranes are involved. Okay. Typically, there are two conditions which are not considered STI. Okay. Bacterial vaginosis. Okay, so what is bacterial vaginosis? This is the disruption or change in the endogenous flora of the vagina. And there is another condition called genital candidiasis. Okay. So these two are not considered STIs. They are not sexually transmitted infections. Okay. So let's come back here. We said an infectious agent is involved in the pathogenesis of a contagious disease. Okay, and we said STIs are contagious diseases. Now, why are we calling it infections and not disease? Okay, because what is an infection? It is basically a growth of an infectious agent within the body. Now, that infectious agent need not cause a disease. Let me give an example. Suppose we have, say, chlamydia. Chlamydia trachomatis. Okay, so this is an infective agent. Say it infects a female. Okay, we designate a female like that. So it infects a female, but the female is, say, asymptomatic. Okay, and the female after infection is asymptomatic, meaning not exhibiting any clinical signs or symptoms. After some days, the female is not treated. Okay, she continues to be untreated. So this asymptomatic disease, asymptomatic female becomes symptomatic. She begins to show certain signs and symptoms. And then she ends up having pelvic inflammatory disease. Okay, so say pelvic inflammatory disease. Okay, so she presents with, say, abdominal pain, or maybe salpingitis, which is the inflammation of the fallopian tubes. Okay, so such condition, such cluster of symptoms, they are basically pelvic inflammatory disease. So, because of the infection, at one stage she was asymptomatic, at other stage she has got a disease. Okay, she has got a disease. So we are saying an infection need not cause a disease. Okay, an infection need not cause a disease. Okay, so in our lecture we are going to stick with this particular notation of sexually transmitted disease. We are going to stick on with, we are going to call them infections, sexually transmitted infections rather than sexually transmitted diseases. So this is one of the reasons why we call it an infection. The second reason is that there is a negative connotation when a disease is combined with sexually. And so it's not considered, it is not accepted widely. Okay, so that is the other reason why in the latest literature we find STDs, previously described sexually transmitted disease, are now discussed under infections. So we are going to look at sexually transmitted infections. Okay. So now the question is, we said that it is caused by an infectious agent. An infectious agent causes STI. Okay, so now let us discuss what are the causative agents of STIs. Okay, so let's write it down maybe here. Causative agents of STIs. Okay, what are the causative agents of STIs? So they are infectious agents. Infectious agents range in different sizes. So we will begin with some of them bacteria. Okay, let's give some examples. Yeah, we gave an example of Chlamydia trachomatis. It is a bacteria. Okay, what disease does it cause? It causes chlamydia. There is another organism, Neisseria gonorrhoeae. Okay, so this causes, what does it cause? Right. Okay, another bacteria which causes is Treponema pallidum. This looks like a capital letter. It's a small letter because we are following the binomial nomenclature. Okay, Treponema pallidum. What disease does it cause? Yes. Causes syphilis. Okay, and then there are minor ones like Haemophilus, Ducreae, which causes chancroid. Chancroid, and then what's the other examples we can give? Say Mycoplasma. Mycoplasma infection is caused by basically two species, Genitalium and Hominis. And there is Ureaplasma, and there is Klebsiella. Inguinale. Okay. So it causes basically granuloma, inguinale. Okay, so those are the most important bacteria which cause STIs. First one is bacteria. Okay, so let's look at second. Let's call viruses. And what examples can we give of viruses? Let's see. The most familiar one would be hepatitis. Hepatitis, we have different types of hepatitis. So the most famous example would be hepatitis B and what herpes simplex virus. Herpes simplex virus. This is type 1 and 2. Okay. Which is the one that causes cancer in women? You're right. Human papilloma virus, HPV. Okay, which is the most famous example? You're right. Human immunodeficiency virus. Is there any other example we can give of? Yes, there is. Can you tell a virus which is spread by mosquitoes, but it is also sexually transmitted? Very famous one, beginning with Z. You're right, it is Zika virus. Okay, it is also spread sexually. Then there is another not quite familiar one, which is the molluscum contagiosum virus. Okay, so those are the most common examples of viruses that cause sexually transmitted infections. What could be the other causative agent? It can be, say, parasites. Right, it's somewhere there. Parasites. Okay. And the example that we could cite would be, it could be Trichomonas vaginalis. Okay. Trias pubis. You're right, this is the pubic lice. Then there is one, pediculosis pubis. And yeah, so those are the most important examples of parasites. Is there any other thing that can cause STI? Yes, there is. Okay. Let's draw it somewhere here. Okay, another causative agent of STI would be fungi. Okay. And what example can we give? The most one which causes Candida? You're absolutely right. It is Candida species. Okay, like Candida albicans. Yeah. So these are the causative agents of STIs. Okay. So in our lecture, from this we are going to look at certain diseases. Which are the diseases that we are going to look at? Let us look into this slide here. All right, we are going to look at bacteria, which is that we are going to study Chlamydia trachomatis. We're going to study chlamydia. Then we are going to study Neisseria gonorrhea. We are going to look at Treponema pallidum. Okay. And we are going to look at herpes simplex. And we are going to look at trichomonas. So now if we look at this, we are going to study a parasite that causes STI. We are going to look at bacteria. We are going to look at a particular virus that causes STI. But we are not going to talk about Candida. Why? Because it is not considered an STI. Okay, so genital candidiasis, it is not considered an STI. Okay, so that's the reason that we are not going to look at candidiasis. However, we are going to look at all this diseases that we have highlighted. So the next question that we're going to consider is sexual activity the only means by which these infections are transmitted? The answer is no. Okay, so STIs additionally may be spread by non-sexual skin-to-skin contact, they may be spread through blood, blood product transfusions. They can be spread by, say, organ transplantation. Some of them can be spread through breast milk. Okay, in which case it spreads from mother to infant, a vertical transmission, which we call vertical transmission. Okay. Not only breast milk, it can be spread transplacentally, okay, so from the mother to the fetus. Transplacentally. Okay, so from mother to infant. Now, why should we study STIs is the other question that we are going to consider now. Okay, why should we study STIs? What is the importance of studying STIs? Why should we study STIs? Okay. So the reason is STIs have got a very big impact on the physical, the psychological, and social life of the infected people. Okay, there is also an increased risk of HIV, okay, in patients having STIs. because of these two very important reasons, healthcare providers should study STIs. Okay, so all these things, the effects on the physical, the psychological, and the social well-being of the patients, along with the increased risk of HIV, all these things in total can decrease the quality of life. Okay, so if your quality of life is reduced, then you're not living to your full potential. And so that is the reason why we should study STIs. Okay, so let's take up the first disease that we're going to talk about. Let's go to the slide. The first disease that we're going to talk about is Chlamydia trachomatis. So, Chlamydia trachomatis is an obligate intracellular bacteria. Okay. So what does this mean? Obligate intracellular bacteria, meaning it needs this cell to survive. It gets into the cell and then that's how it multiplies. So why is it obligate? Why is it obligate? Why does it need a human cell to survive? The reason is that it cannot produce ATP. Okay, so the Chlamydia trachomatis organisms, it cannot produce ATP. So it utilizes the ATP generating machinery of the human cell. So it basically takes glucose as a carbon source from the human environment. Okay. So that is the problem with this organism. Okay, so that is why it is a obligate intracellular organism. The other thing to remember here is Chlamydia trachomatis is very, very small. It is 0.2 to 0.1 micron. So for bacterial filtration, the membrane that we use is 0.45 microns. So it can actually cross the 0.45 micron filtration membrane. It can cross. Okay, so therefore, if you do a sterilization filtration and if there is chlamydia present, you cannot do a sterilization by filtration. Okay. Now, the other thing to remember is chlamydia has got an atypical peptidoglycan. Peptidoglycan. Okay, as a result, penicillins are not very effective. Now, there are different serotypes of Chlamydia trachomatis. Serotypes. Okay, so serotypes are the class of chlamydia that act differently towards different antibodies. So based on that, we say they are serovars. Okay, so these terms are alternatively used. And there is a serovar A to C. Okay, and that causes blindness or trachoma. Okay, the serovar D to K attacks the mucus. Okay, so attached to the mucosal cells, okay, of the genital tract. Oops. The genital tract. Conjunctiva. The pharynx and the rectum. Okay. So from this description itself, we know the most important sexually transmitted diseases are caused by this serotype D2K. Then there is another serotype, it is named L1 to 3. Okay, so these causes lymphogranuloma, venereal, venereal. Okay, so they cause lymphogranuloma venereum. This is another sexually transmitted disease that is seen in men having sex with men. Okay. Yeah. So the most common one is the D2K serotype. So we are going to discuss about the D2K serotype. So let's look at the reproductive cycle. Okay, so there are two kind of bodies that are produced. One is called an EB, elementary body, and RB, reticulate body. Okay. So what is this elementary body? It is the infectious form. Infectious form. Okay. And it is metabolically inert. Okay. So it's basically like an extracellular spore-like body. Okay, and that is the infectious form, and it is metabolically inert. The reticulate body then is the non-infectious form. Okay, so obviously it is metabolically active. And this is the obligate intracellular form. Okay. So if we know this, then we can explain lots of things. Okay, suppose there is, let's consider it is sexually transmitted. So say it reaches a mucosal tissue. Say it's the vagina. Okay. So the vagina is lined by, we have epithelial tissues, epithelial cells. So let's draw an epithelial cell. Okay. Let's call this an epithelial cell. Okay, so due to the sexual transmission, say one from the male, it reaches the vagina and it reaches the epithelial cell. So what happens is, let's say this is the EB This is the EB form. So from the male it reaches the female and it is the infectious form. So the EB reaches the epithelial cell. It gets internalized into the vacuole. Okay. And herein it undergoes replication. Okay, so it changes the form. To replicate, what has to happen? It has to become metabolically active. Okay, so it changes from EB to RB form. Okay, so this RB form then begins to grow and reproduce in the this vacuum. Then what happens? This cell will burst. This cell will burst, releasing what? The infected form. Okay. So there is release of the infectious form. So then what happens? That infectious form goes and attacks other cells, and the infection begins to establish itself. Now, when the cells are breaking, it can give rise to inflammation. Okay. Breakage of the cells can lead to inflammation. Okay, and then it is an infected cell, so some WBCs will come, and then they will try to phagocytose, they will try to bring about apoptosis, and that can also lead to inflammation. Okay, so what is the patient going to feel? The patient is going to feel pain. Okay, and then what happens? This is now in the vaginal tract. There is pain, there is inflammation, and what will happen? There will be the WBCs, all these things after inflammation, they will be coming out of the vagina. So there will be a discharge. Okay, and due to this pain, the patient would feel a burning pain during urination, and that is called dysuria. Okay, burning pain while urinating. And this can also lead to pain during sexual intercourse, and that is called dyspareunia. Okay. These things can happen. So this is how a patient presents. Okay, with pain, with discharge, with dysuria and dyspareunia. Okay, but dyspareunia, during sexual intercourse. In the males also similarly, this similar presenting symptoms would be present. Now let us look at the urinary tract of the women. So in front you have got the bladder. So that's the urinary bladder. And this is the anterior and this is the posterior end. So you can see the genitourinary tract. Okay, so this is the genitourinary tract, this being the vagina, and that being the uterus. Again, this is the urethra. So this infection happens in the vagina, and it also goes into the urethral tract, okay, because it's present in the vulva, the opening of the vagina. And so what happens is, this infection begins to establish itself. It causes this pain and inflammation. If it happens in the urethra, we call it, what do we call it? Urethritis. Okay. vaginitis. If it goes up, somewhere here would be this cervix. The opening of the uterus, we call it this cervix. So if the infection establishes itself in the cervix, we call it, what do we call it? Cervicitis. Okay. Urethritis, vaginitis. Okay. And if it happens in the fallopian tubes, then we call it salpingitis. Okay. So in the female, there is chances of this infection getting into the abdominal cavity, into the okay, so there is chances of it entering the abdominal cavity, though this is not there in the male because the anatomy is kind of different. Okay, so now, so if it comes into the abdominal cavity and then establishes itself, we call it the PID. What is PID? Pelvic inflammatory disease. Yeah. So it can cause PID in the females. In the males, it won't cause PID. Okay, so now say we do not bring about an intervention. We don't give the patient drugs. Then what will happen is there will be scarification of the salpinges, the tubes. As a result, what will happen is there can be ectopic pregnancy. Okay, so whenever the pregnancy is established outside the uterus, in the uterine tube, then that is called ectopic pregnancy. So due to this scarification on healing, it can cause ectopic pregnancy. It can make the women infertile. Okay, it can cause pelvic inflammatory disease. Again, this kind of brings about an abdominal pain. Can bring about sterility. Okay, infertility. Okay, so it can lead to sterility. And what can happen is, suppose there is a baby that's being born and then it's coming down, then when transplacentally, the baby can get infected and that can cause conjunctivitis in the baby. It can cause a baby to be born stillborn. It can cause the death of the conceptus. Okay. Conjunctivitis, maybe pneumonia in the infant that is going to be born. All these things can happen. Okay? And in the males, again, there is a discharge. Now, if you look at the males, the urinary tract is quite long. The urethra is quite long. So you have got this particular gland which is not present in the females called the prostate gland. Okay. So you can have prostate gland, then you have got the testes. Okay, so the infection can establish itself as a urethritis. It can enter the prostate gland and cause the prostatitis. Okay. It can enter the testis and cause orchitis. Okay. The epididymis can cause an inflammation of the epididymis. Okay. So epididymo-orchitis can happen. And then it can become systemic. It can go into the blood. And then it can cause systemic infections. It can establish itself as a systemic infection. So these are the reasons why chlamydia should be treated. Okay, so this is the reason why chlamydia should be treated. So you want to prevent all these things. So this is why we have to treat. It has to be. Okay, so treatment is indicated. Okay, so treatment is indicated. So if you treat, then you can prevent all this sequelae of the infection. Okay. So what is common to all STIs is that for all the STIs, there will be dysuria. Okay, and sometimes dyspareunia. Okay, there can be discharge, and sometimes it can be associated with pain. So this is the reason why infected people seek out a treatment. Okay? So this might be common to almost all of the sexually transmitted infections. Okay. So now we say we can treat it. Okay. So there are different things that we can do in an infection. So in one of the previous classes, we have talked that an infectious disease has got a triad. Okay, you've got the host, you've got the disease, and you've got the infective agent. Okay, so you can do certain things with the host, like you can intervene in the host and say you have to use a condom, and then you can prevent the disease, right? So you can do an intervention at the host level, or you can do an intervention against the infective agent. Okay. Sorry, this should be here disease, and here the triad you have the environment. Okay, so this is the triad. Or you can interfere with the environment, or you can intervene at the level of the infective agent. So drugs, we are intervening at the level of the infective agent, or we are targeting the infective agent with drugs. Okay, so in this case, we are talking about chlamydia trachomatis, and the drug therapy, the regimen is it's a macrolide antibiotic, azithromycin. Okay, it's 1 gram. Okay, it's given per oral. It's a single dose. Okay. The other regimen is doxycycline. This is given 100 milligram twice a day into 7 days. Okay, so this is the regimen for chlamydia trachomatis. Now, with almost all the sexually transmitted infection, the general principle is that we want to give as a single dose. So what is the importance of that? So if the drug regimen is a single dose, then there will be increased compliance. Okay, so the patient would be willing to comply, and that can result in remission. Okay, so what is our target with the regimen? We are trying to eliminate the organism. Okay, so that is the goal with the drug. Now let's look at some details with respect to these drugs. Let's talk about azithromycin in some little bit of detail. Okay, so this, as we alluded to earlier, it's a macrolide. Macrolide antibiotic. Okay, and the prototype drug in the macrolide class. So every class has got the first drug that comes, that is called the prototype drug. In this case, the prototype drug is erythromycin. So the prototype drug is erythromycin. So the prototype drug of macrolide is macrolide. The prototype drug is erythromycin. Now, azithromycin has got increased tissue penetration. It has got a broader spectrum of activity. And lesser GI irritation compared to erythromycin. So these are the advantages of azithromycin over erythromycin. Okay, so the question that we are trying to answer is, why is azithromycin given for this particular disease? Why can't this particular infection? Why can't we give erythromycin? Then this is the answer. Okay, it has got certain advantages over erythromycin. So then let's look at the mechanism of action. Okay, macrolide antibiotic, it interferes with the protein synthesis. So basically binds to 50S ribosomal subunit, and thereby it inhibits protein synthesis. Okay, so that is the mechanism of action of azithromycin. What are the important adverse effects? Okay, the important adverse effects that we have to remember is, so it has got less GI irritation, which means it has got GI irritation. Okay, so compared to erythromycin, it has got less GI irritation, but still it has got GI irritation. And anything that irritates the GI tract, if the GI tract is irritated, you would have nausea, vomiting. You can have abdominal pain, or you can, if this, okay, let's write it down here. Nausea and vomiting, abdominal pain. Now, if you give an antibiotic, it kills not only the organism here, Chlamydia trachomatis, it also kills the endogenous microflora of the GIT. Okay, so therefore, it can cause diarrhea. Okay, so it interferes with the endogenous microflora, and more often than not, it leads to diarrhea. The other thing to remember is, the adverse effect is that it causes increase in the liver enzymes. So normally, if suppose you take a liver cell, let's say this is my representation of a liver, and there is a cell here. Usually in the liver, the enzymes are located within the cell. These enzymes are intracellular. Okay, meaning these enzymes will not be found in blood. Now, if there is damage to the liver, what happens is, these enzymes are released from the cells, from the intracellular environment into the blood. Again, so if you take this blood and you find there are the liver enzymes are seen in blood, it means the liver cell has been damaged. Okay, the liver cell has been compromised. So whenever you see there is increased liver enzymes, it means the drug is hepatotoxic. Okay, that is a problem, especially if the patient has got comorbidities. If the patient has got, say, hepatitis, or the patient is alcoholic, then there can be definite interactions, and then we need to adjust the dose or maybe change the drug. Okay, so hepatically metabolized drug, as far as possible, should not be given to a patient who has got a liver problem which is pre-existing, or if the person is alcoholic. Okay, so it can cause increase in the liver enzyme. Then it can cause pruritus. So pruritus is the technical word for itching. Okay? And pruritus in the skin, it can give, sometimes it can present as rashes, rash in the skin, okay, or urticaria. Okay, so these are basically connected with itching. Okay, so these are the things that are seen in the skin. So the adverse effects would be hepatotoxicity in the liver, the skin, and the GIT. So that's how we could remember. Okay, so the adverse effects are seen in the skin, the liver, and the GIT. Okay. Okay. So those are the most important things that we need to remember about azithromycin. Let's look at the next drug in the regimen. Okay, so the next drug was doxycycline. Okay, so what are the important points that we need to remember about doxycycline? It's a tetracycline derivative. The good thing about this is it is readily absorbed per orally. So this is the pharmacokinetics of this drug. It is easily absorbed per orally. Okay. So, but then it is a tetracycline. Okay, it's a tetracycline. What is the adverse reaction common to all tetracyclines? What do? Yes? Yeah. They complex with metal ions. Okay, so usually divalent and trivalent ions, they form complexes. Now, if you give a tetracycline and it complexes, so metal ions, and it will form a complex. So this complex is usually stable in acid. So whereas if you give doxycycline, this complex is not stable in acidic pH. So as a result, what will happen is, though it forms a complex, the complex dissociates in the acidic pH. As a result, it goes into the intestine and there will be increased absorption. Okay, so that is the advantage of doxycycline over other tetracyclines. Okay, it has got increased bioavailability. When you give it per oral. Okay, so that is the reason why doxycycline is given. Okay, the other thing to remember it is, so in the intestine, the free form. Okay, free form has got increased absorption. Okay, you got the idea. It is distributed. That is important in this drug. It is distributed in almost all the body fluids. Okay, so a drug which is distributed in all the body fluids would be a very good drug for a sexually transmitted infection, because we told what can happen is the infection can become disseminated through the blood. Okay, sometimes it is disseminated through the blood. Disseminated through the blood, and it establishes itself as a systemic infection. Okay. So if you got a drug that goes into all the body fluids, like the synovial fluid, it goes into the all the different fluids, the CNS, etc., then it is a good drug. Okay. So what's the mechanism of action then? Again, to remember chlamydia trachomatis, both the drugs which are used for chlamydia trachomatis target protein synthesis. Okay, so this also inhibits protein synthesis by binding to the 50S ribosomal subunit. Okay, so in a bacteria, if you remember, it has got a ribosomal subunit that is made up of 30S and 50S subunit. Together it is a 70S. In prokaryotes, we have got a 70S ribosomal unit. So in the eukaryotes, it is an 80S ribosomal subunit. So that is the selectivity. So why is doxycycline selective for Treponema pallidum? It is because it targets the 50S subunit of this 70S ribosome. So it does not act largely on the 80S. Okay. So in this, there are three sites. Okay. The 50S ribosomal unit has got three sites. One is called the A site, one is called the P site, and one is called the E site. Okay. So what happens is, in between this, we have got the messenger RNA coming. Okay, so the messenger RNA comes like that. So that's the messenger RNA. Then what happens is, amino acid containing transfer RNAs. So if that is a transfer RNA, tRNA. So this tRNA brings the amino acid corresponding to the sequence on the messenger RNA, and it comes here. And this amino acyl tRNA okay, it is not allowed at the A site. Okay, so the amino acyl tRNA is not allowed to bind to the A site. So amino acyl tRNA is prevented from binding to the A site of the 50S ribosomal subunit. And that is how it prevents protein synthesis. So thus protein synthesis is inhibited. Now the problem with this drug is, as we earlier mentioned, it can chelate the ions. and therefore it is contraindicated in pregnancy. Then it is lipid soluble and therefore it can get into breast milk, so it is contraindicated in breastfeeding. And in children who are growing or less than 8 years. Okay, so this, if you give this drug, it will interfere with the growth. Okay, it will interfere with the deposition of minerals in the bones, and thereby interfere with the growth of the infant and the children here. Okay, so that is the contraindication of this drug. Again, the adverse drug reactions. The ADRs is, it causes GI irritation. Again, that can result in nausea and vomiting, abdominal pain, etc. It can cause rashes, again in the skin. Again, it can cause another thing that it causes, which azithromycin causes less, is something called phototoxicity. Again, it is on the skin. So the main adverse reaction we find in the GIT and the skin. So it's kind of easy to remember which are the adverse effects of this particular drug. Okay. Yeah. So those are the most important drugs which are given for the treatment of what? Treatment of which disease are we talking about? Which disease? Chlamydia trachomatis.